we go! Watership Down, episode 14 of Just Cheesy Audiobook. And very few people want to view this or look at it, but I don't care, right?
No.
I don't care.
It's not being done for them anyway.
That's right. So you can keep your 10,000 or 50,000 subscribers. I don't give a damn. So there you go. And, well, you don't have to. Like trees in November, according to this down here, before we go on to this, courts and camps are the only places to learn the world in. Take the tone of the company that you are in. The Earl of Chesterfield, letters to his sons. The great burrow was less crowded than when they had left it. Nidrohane was the first rabbit they met. She was among a group of 3 or 4 does who were talking quietly together and seemed to be feeding as well. There was the smell of green stuff. Evidently, some kind of food was available underground, like the Flayrah's lettuce. Hazel stopped to speak to Nidrohane. She asked whether he had gone as far as the well pit and the El Ra of Librarium. Yes, we did, said Hazel. It's something quite strange to me, I'm afraid. But I rather admire you and your friends than stones on a wall. Ooh, sounds like Hazel wants to get down.
Putting the moves on.
Yep. As he said this, he noticed that Cowslip had joined them and that Strawberry was talking to him quietly. He caught the words, "Never been near a shape." And a moment later, Cowslip replied, "Well, it makes no difference from our point of view." Wow, what a dick. Hazel suddenly felt tired and depressed. He heard Blackberry behind Cowslip's sleek, heavy shoulder and went across to him. "Come on out to the grass," he said quietly. "Bring everybody else will come." At that moment, Cowslip turned to him and said, "You'll be glad to know that there's something to eat now. I will show what we got down here." "Well, 1 or 2 of us are just going to souffle," said Hazel. "Oh, it's raining much too hard for that," said Cowslip, as though there could be no 2 ways about it. "We'll feed you here." "I shouldn't be sorry to quarrel over it," said Hazel firmly, "but some of us need to souffle, and we're used to it and the rain doesn't bother us." Cowslip seemed to taken aback for a moment. Then he laughed. The phenomenon of laughter is unknown to animals. Although it's possible that dogs and elephants may have some inkling to it, the effect on Hazel and Blackberry was overwhelming. Hazel's first idea was Cowslip was showing a symptom of some kind of disease. Blackberry clearly thought he was going to attack them and backed away. Cowslip said nothing, but his eerie laughter continued. By the way, souffle means go above ground to feed, for anybody that asks. Hazel and Blackberry turned and scuttled up the nearest run as though he'd been a ferret. Halfway up, they met Pipkin, who was small enough to let them pass and then turn around to follow them. The rain still falling steadily. The night was dark and for May, cold. All three hutched themselves in the grass, nibbled while the rain ran off their fur in streams. My goodness, Hazel, said Blackberry. Did you really want the souffle? This is terrible. I was just going to eat whatever it is they have and then go to sleep. What's the idea? I don't know, replied Hazel. I suddenly felt I had to get out and I wanted your company. I can see what's troubling Fiber, though. He'll get over it, I dare say. There is something strange about these rabbits. Did you know they push stones into the wall? They do what? Hazel explained, and Blackberry was much as a loss as he'd been himself. I'll tell you one other thing, he said. Bigwig was too far wrong. They do sing like birds. His doe... Oh, I was going into a burrow that belonged to a rabbit named Batoni. His doe has a litter, and she was making noise over them like a robin in autumn. To send them to sleep, she said. It made me feel queer, I can tell you. What do you think of them, Hazel-Roo? Asked Hazel. Well, they're very nice and kind, answered Pipkin. But I'll tell you what strikes me. They all seem terribly sad. I can't think why. They're so big and strong and have this beautiful warren. But they put me in mind of the trees in November. I expect I'm being silly, though, Hazel. You brought us here, and I'm sure you must be buying a safe place. No, you're not being silly. I haven't realized it, but you're perfectly right. They seem to have something going on their minds. But after all, said Blackberry, we don't know why there are so few. They don't feel the warren like anything. Perhaps there's some sort of trouble that left them sad. Well, we don't know because they won't tell us. But if they're going to stay here, we're going to have to learn to get on with them. We can't fight them. They're way too big. And we don't want them fighting us. I don't believe they can fight, Hazel, said Pipkin. Although they're so big, they don't seem like fighters to me. Not like Bigwig and Silver. You do notice a lot, don't you, Hazel-Roo, says Hazel. Did you notice it's raining harder than ever? I got enough grass in my stomach for a bit. Let's go down again and let's keep to ourselves for a while. Why not sleep, says Blackberry. It's been over a night and a day now, and I'm dropping. They returned down to a different hole and soon found a dry, empty burrow, and they all curled up together and slept in the warmth of their own tired bodies. When Hazel awoke, he perceived at once it was morning, sometime after sunrise by the smell of it. The scent of apple blossom was plain enough. Then he picked up the familiar smell, fainter smells of buttercups and horses, mingled as they all came together. Although it made him uneasy, he could not tell for some moments what it was. A dangerous smell, an unpleasant smell, a totally unnatural smell. Quite close outside, a smoke smell. Something was burning. Then he remembered how Bigwig, after his reconnaissance the previous day, had spoken of little white sticks in the grass. That was it. A man had been walking over the ground outside, and that must have awakened him. Hazel lay in the warm, dark burrow with a delightful sense of security. He could smell the man. The man cannot smell him. All the man could smell was that nasty smoke he was making. He fell into thinking of the shape in the well pit and then dropped off into a drowsy half-dream in which Flayrah said it was all a trick of his to disguise himself as a poison tree and put the stones in the wall, to engage Strawberry's attention while he himself was getting acquainted with Nidralhain. Pipkin stirred and turned in his sleep, muttering, Selim Lenar Malari. Is the ground so nice, Mother? Is what its interpretation was. And Hazel, touched of thinking he must be dreaming of the old days, rolled over on his side to give him more room to settle again. At that moment, however, he heard a rabbit approaching down the run close by. Whoever it was, he was calling and stamping as well. Hazel noticed in unnatural way. The sound, as Strawberry had said, was not like birdsong, but as he came closer, Hazel can distinguish the word, Flayrah! Flayrah! The voice was Strawberry's. Pipkin and Blackberry were awaking more at the stamping than the voice, which was thin and novel, not striking through their sleep of any deep instinct. Hazel slipped out of the burrow into the run and at once came upon Strawberry busily stamping his hind leg on the hard earth floor. My mother used to say, if you are a horse, the ceiling will come down, Hazel said. Why do you stamp underground? To wake up everyone, answered Strawberry. The rain went nearly all night, and we generally sleep right through it until the early morning if it's rough weather. But it's fine now. Why actually wake everybody, though? Well, the man's gone by. And Cowslip and I thought the Flayrah ought to not lie about for long. If we don't go and get it, the rats and the rooks will come, and I don't like fighting rats. I expect it's an all in a day's work for adventurous types like you. I don't understand. Well, come along with me, and I'm going back along for this run for Nidralhain. She haven't got a litter at the present, you see, but she'll come out like with the rest of us. Other rabbits were making their way along the run, and Strawberry spoke to several of them, more than once remarking that he enjoyed taking their new friends across the field. Hazel began to realize that he liked Strawberry. On the previous day, he was too tired and bewildered to size him up. But now that he had a good sleep, he could see that Strawberry was really harmless, decent sort of fellow. He was touchily devoted to the beautiful Nidralhain, and he evidently had the moods of gaiety and great capacity for enjoyment. As they came up into the May morning, he hopped over to a ditch and skipped along the long grass as blithe as a squirrel. He seemed quite to have lost the preoccupation ere he had troubled Hazel the night before. Hazel himself paused at the mouth of the hole, and he always had behind the bramble curtain at home and looked out across the valley. Ugh. The sun has risen beyond the copse and threw long shadows from the trees southward across the field. The wet grass glittered, and nearby a nut tree sparkled indecent, winkling and gleaming as its branches moved in the light wind. The brook was swollen, and Hazel's ears can distinguish the deeper, smoother sounds changed since the day before. Between the copse and the brook, the slope was covered with pale ladies' smocks, each standing separately in the grass, a frail stalk of bloom above the spread of the crusty leaves. The breeze dropped and the little valley lay completely still, held in the long beams of light enclosed on either side of the lines of the wood. Upon clear stillness, the feathers on the surface of a pool fell the calling of a cuckoo. "It's quite safe, Hazel," said Cowslip behind her. "I know you're used to taking a good look around when you souffle, but we generally go straight out." Hazel did not mean to alter his ways or take instructions from Cowslip. However, no one had pushed him, and there was no point of bickering over trifles. He hopped along the ditch to the further bank and looked round him again. Several rabbits were already running down the field towards the distant hedge dabbled in white and great patches of maybloom. He saw Bigwig and Silver and went to join them, flickering off his paws step by step like a cat. "I hope your friends is looking after you as well as these fellows look after of us, Hazel," said Bigwig. "Silver and I really feel at home again. If you ask me, I reckon we all made a big change for the better. Even if it's fiber is wrong and nothing terrible has happened back at the old Warren, I dare say we're better off here. Are you coming along to feed?" "What's this business of going to feed, do you know?" asked Hazel. "Haven't they told you? Apparently there's Flayrah to have down on the fields and downs. Most of them go every day." Rabbits usually eat grass, as everyone knows, but more appetizing foods such as lettuce and carrots, for which they make an expedition to rob a garden, is Flayrah. If everybody remembers the lettuce and Flayrah's cabin. "Flayrah, isn't it rather late in the morning to raid a garden?" said Hazel, glancing at the distant roofs on the farm behind the trees. "No, no," said one of the Warren rabbits who have overheard him. "The Flayrah's left in the field, usually near the place where the brook rises. We either eat it or bring it back or both. We'll have to bring some back today. The rain was so hard last night that no one went out, and we ate almost everything in the warren." The brook ran through the hedgerow, and there was a cattle wade in the gap. After the rain, the edges were a swamp, with water standing in every hoof print. The rabbits gave them a wide berth and came through another gap further up, close to the gnarled trunk of an old crabapple tree. Beyond, surrounding a thicket of rushes, stood an enclosure of posts and rails as high as a man. Inside it, the kingcups bloomed and the brook overwhelmed up to its sources. On the pasture nearby, Hazel can see scattered rustlet of orange-colored fragments, some with the feathery light green foliage showing up against the darker grass. They gave up a pungent, horsey smell, and as if it was freshly cut. It attracted him. He began to salivate and stopped to pass Haraka. Haraka is shit, folks. Cowslip, coming up nearby, turned towards him in an unnatural smile. By now, Hazel, in his eagerness, paid no attention. Powerfully drawn, he ran out to the hedgerow towards the scattered ground, and he came across fragments, sniffed it and tasted it. It was a carrot. Hazel has eaten various roots of his life, but only once before he tasted a carrot, when a horse cart had spilled a nose bag near the home warren. They were old carrots, some half-eaten by mice or flies. But it was rabbits riddled on with luxury, a feast to drive all other feelings out of mind. Hazel sat nibbling and biting the rich, full taste of cultivating roots, filling him with a wave of pleasure. He hopped about the grass, gnarling on one piece after another, eating the green tops along with the slices. No one interrupted him. They seemed to be plenty for all. From time to time, instinctively, he looked up and sniffed in the wind, but his caution was half-hearted. If a little come this way, he thought, I'll fight the lot. I couldn't run away. What a country. What a warren. No wonder they're all big as hares and smell like princes. Hello, Pipkin. Fill yourself up to the ears. No more shivering on banks of streams for you, old chap. He won't know how to sliver in a week or two, said Hawkbit with his mouth full. I feel so much better for this. I follow you anyway, Hazel. I wasn't myself in the heather that night. It's best when you know you can't get underground. I hope you understand. All is forgiven, says Hazel. You better ask Cowslip what we're supposed to do about taking this stuff back to the warren. He found Cowslip near the spring. He had evidently finished feeding and was washing his face with his front paws. Are these roots here every day? Asked Hazel. Where? And he checked himself just in time. I'm learning, he thought. Not all roots, said Cowslip. These are the last years. You have noticed, I suppose, the remains are being cleaned out. Maybe something, anything, roots, green stuff, old apples. It depends. Sometimes there's nothing at all, especially in good summer weather. But it's hard weather. In winter, it's nearly always something. Bring roots, usually or kale or sometimes corn. We can eat that too, you know. Food's no problem then? The whole place ought to be full of rabbits, I suppose. And if you must have finished, interrupted Cowslip, there is no hurry. Take your time. You could try carrying. It's easy with these roots, and easier than anything except lettuce. You simply bite into one, take it back to the warren, and put it in a great burrow. I generally take 2 at a time, but then I've had a lot of practice. Rabbits don't usually carry food. I know, but you'll learn. It's useful to have a store. The does need some for their young when they're getting bigger, and it's particularly convenient for all of us in bad weather. Come back with me and I'll help you find the carrying difficult at first. Was that your mom?
No.
Oh. It took Hazel some trouble to learn to grip half a carrot in his mouth and carry it like a dog across the field back to the warren. He had put it down several times, but Cowslip was encouraging him, and he was determined to keep up his position as a resourceful leader of the newcomers. At his suggestion, they both waited at the mouth of one of the larger holes to see how his companions were shaping. They all seemed to be making an effort and doing their best. All those smaller rabbits, particularly Pipkin, clearly found the task an awkward one. "Cheer up, Pipkin," says Hazel. "I think you'll enjoy eating it tonight. Anyway, I'm sure Fiber is finding it hard as you. He's just as small." "I don't know where he is," said Pipkin. "Have you seen him?" Now that Hazel thought of it, he had not. He had become a little anxious, and he returned across the field with Cowslip. He did his best to explain Fiber's particular temperament. "Well, I hope he's all right," he said. "I think perhaps I'll go and look for him when we carry this lot. Have you any idea where he might be?" He waited for Cowslip to reply, but then he disappeared. After a few moments, Cowslip says, "Look, do you see those jackdaws hanging around the carrots? They've been a nuisance for several days now, and I must try to get somebody to keep them off until we finish carrying. But they're too big for a rabbit to tackle. Now, sparrows..." "What has this got to do with Fiber?" asked Hazel. "In fact," said Cowslip, breaking a run, "I'll go myself." But he did not engage the jackdaws. Hazel saw him pick up another carriage and started back with it. Annoyed, he joined Buckthorn and Dandelion, and the three of them returned together. They came upon the warren and suddenly caught sight of Fiber. He was sitting half concealed under a low spread of yew trees on the edge of the copse, some way away from the holes of the warren. He put down his carrot, and Hazel ran across, scrambling up the bank to join him under the low crossed boughs. Fiber said nothing and continued to stare over the field. "Aren't you coming to learn to carry, Fiber?" Hazel at length. "It's not too difficult once you get the hang of it." "I'll have nothing to do with it," answered Fiber in a low voice. "Dogs! You look like dogs carrying sticks." "Fiber, are you trying to make me angry?" "I'm not going to get angry because you call me stupid names. But you're letting the others do all the work." "I'm not the one that ought to be angry," says Fiber. "But I'm no good at it. That's the trouble. Why should they blame me? Half of them think I'm mad. You're to blame, Hazel, because you know I'm not, and still you won't listen." "So you don't like the warren any better now, even now? Well, I think you're wrong. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. Why shouldn't you make a mistake like everyone else? Hawkbit was wrong on the heather, and you're wrong now. Those rabbits down there trotting along like a lot of squirrels with nuts. How can that be right?" "Well, I say they copied a good idea from the squirrels and made them into better rabbits." "Do you suppose the man, whoever he is, puts those roots out there because he has a kind heart? What's he up to?" "He's just throwing away rubbish. How many rabbits have had a good meal off of men's rubbish heaps? Shot lettuces, old turnips. You know what we all do, and when we can. It's not poison, Fiber. I can tell you that. And if he wanted to shoot rabbits, he had plenty of chances with this morning, but he hasn't done it." Fiber seems to grow even smaller as he flattened himself on the hard earth. "And I'm a fool to try to argue," he said miserably. "Hazel, dear old Hazel, it's simply that I know there's something unnatural and evil twisted around this place. I don't know what it is, so no wonder I can't talk about it. I'll keep going near it, though, and you know how you poke your nose against the wire netting and push it up against the apple tree. But you still can't bite the bark because of the wire. I'm close to this, whatever it is. I can't grip it. I'll just sit here alone. Maybe I might stretch it out a little yet. Fiber, why not do as I say? Have a meal on the roots and then go underground to sleep. You'll feel all better for it. I can tell you I have nothing to do with that place, said Fiber. As I'm going for underground, I'd rather go back over the heather. The roof of that hall is made of bones. No, tree roots. But after all, you're underground at night. I wasn't, said Fiber. What? Where were you then? Here. All night? Yes. A huge tree gives good shelter, you know. Hazel was now seriously worried. If Fiber's horse is keeping him above ground all night in the rain, it's obviously the cold and the prowling elu. And then clearly it's not going to be easy to talk him out of him. He is silent for some time, and at last he said, "What a shame. I still think you'd do better to come and join us. But I'll let you alone for now, and you can come and see how you're feeling better. Don't go eating the yew tree either." Fiber made no reply, and Hazel went back to the field. The day was certainly not of encouraging forbidding. By 9 it was hot, the lower part of the field was humid. The air was heavy with thick, herbal smells. Even though it was late June, the water mint and marjoram, not yet flowering, gave off a scent from their leaves. And here and there, early meadowsweet stood at blossom. Remember earlier in the chapter it said it was May, now it's late June. I think this guy messed up when he wrote this. The chip-chap was busy all morning, high in the silver birch near the abandoned holes, across the dip, and from deep as the copse somewhere of disused well came a beautiful song of the blackcup. By early afternoon there was a stillness of heat and a herd of cows in the shade. Only a few of the rabbits remained above ground. Almost all were asleep in burrows, and still Fiber sat alone under the yew tree. In the early evening, Hazel sought out Bigwig, and together they ventured to the copse outside the warren. At first, they moved cautiously, and before long they grew confident there was no trace of any creatures larger than a mouse. "There's nothing to smell," said Bigwig. "No tracks. I think Cowslip told us no more than the truth. There really any elu here. Different from that wood where we crossed in the river. I don't mind telling you, Hazel, I was scared stiff that night. But I wasn't going to show it." "Neither am I," answered Hazel. "Well, I do agree with you about this place. Seems completely clear if we..." "This is odd, though," interrupted Bigwig. He was in a clump of brambles in the middle of which a rabbit hole had been led up to one of the warrens from below. The ground was soft and damp, and old leaves stick in the mold. Where Bigwig stopped, there were signs of commotion. The rotten leaves had been thrown up in showers, and some of them were hanging in the brambles, and a few wet clots was lying well out in the open above an open ground beyond the clump. In the center of the earth is lay bare, with scored and long scratches and furrows, and there had been a narrow, regular hole, about the size of one of the carrots they were carrying that morning. The two rabbits sniffed and stared, but could not make nothing of it. "That's funny, there's no smell," said Bigwig. "No, not a rabbit." anywhere, of course. A man was everywhere, too. That smell very well have nothing to do with it. It tells us that the man walked through the wood and threw a smoke stick down. It wasn't a man that tore up this ground. Well, these mad rabbits probably danced in the moonlight or something. I wouldn't be surprised, says Hazel. It would just be like them. Ask Cowslip. That's the only silly thing you said so far. Tell me, since we came here, has Cowslip answered any of the questions you've asked him? Well, no, not many. Try ask him if he dances in the moonlight. Say, Cowslip, where? Oh, you noticed that too, have you? He won't answer. Where anything. Neither will Strawberry. I think they might be nervous of us. Pipkin was right, though, when he says they weren't fighters. So they're keeping up a mystery to stay even with us. It's best that we put up with it, or we don't want to upset them, and it's bound to smooth out in time. There's more rain coming tonight, says Bigwig. Soon, too. I think let's go underground and see what we can get them to talk a bit more freely. I think that's something we can only wait for. But I agree that I'm going underground now, for goodness sakes. Let's get Fiber to come along with us. He troubles me. Do you know he was out all night in the rain? And as they came back through the copse, Hazel recounted his talk with Fiber that morning. They found him under the yew tree in rather stormy scene, during which Bigwig grew rough and impatient. He would rather bully rather than persuade to go down with them in the great barrow. It was crowded, and the rain began to fall more, and the rabbits came down the runs. They pushed about, chirpily and chattering. Carrots has been brought in and eaten by friends and carried away to does and families and burrows all over the warren. But when they were finished, the hall remained full. It was generally warm with the heat of so many bodies. Gradually, the talkative group settled down into contented silence, and there was no one seemed disposed to go to sleep. Rabbits are lively at nightfall. Even during rain drives them underground when they're most gregarious. Hazel noticed that almost all of his companions seemed to have become friendly with the warren rabbits. Also, found whenever he would move into one group or another, the warren rabbits evidently knew that he was and treated him like the leader of the newcomers. He could not find Strawberry, and after a time, Cowslip came up from the under end of the hall. I'm glad you're here, Hazel, he said. Some of our lot are suggesting a story from somebody. We were hoping one of your people would like to tell one. We can begin ourselves if you prefer. There was a rabbit saying in the warren. There was a rabbit saying, in the warrens, most stories than passages, and a rabbit could no more refuse to tell a story than an Irishman that can refuse to fight. Hazel and his friends conferred, and after a short time, Blackberry announced, We've asked Hazel to tell you about our adventures, and how we made our journey here, and the good luck to join you. There was an uncomfortable silence, broken only by shuffling and whispering. Blackberry, dismayed, turned back to Hazel and Bigwig. What's the matter? He said in a low voice. Surely there's no harm in that. Wait, replied Hazel quietly. Let them tell us if they don't like it, and they'll have their own ways here. However, the silence continued for some time, although the other rabbits didn't care to mention what they thought was wrong. It's no good, Blackberry at last. You'll have to say something yourself, Hazel. No, Why don't you should you? I'll do it. He spoke up again. On second thoughts, Hazel remembers that we have a good storyteller amongst us. Dandelion, why don't you tell a story of Eleanor? That can't go wrong, can it? He whispered. Ah, which one? Says Dandelion. Hazel remembered the stones on the pit. The king's lettuce, he answers. Don't think a lot of that, I believe. Dandelion took up his cue with the same plucky readiness that is shown in the wood. I will tell the story of the king's lettuce, he said out loud. We shall enjoy that, replied Cowslip immediately. He better, muttered Bigwig. Dandelion began. That is the end of Watership Down episode 14. Any thoughts, feedback, screams, cries, bitches, moans, and grumbling?
Cowslip's up to something. Flayrah don't know how to keep his mouth shut. Hazel's a horn dog with bad moves.
What about Fiverr? Anything about Fiverr?
That's it. Flayrah can't get his mouth shut.
Okay, so he's a dipshit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, he's worried. Yes, he's trying to figure out what's going on. Hazel's thinking of his dick. That's all.
What the hell? All right. Well, you know, this story, very long-winded in details about plants and flowers and trees. I'm more of a straightforward fellow, like what the hell? And this guy spends a lot of time writing about what the types of plants there are, flowers, foods.
Oh, Richard Adams was a naturalist and a hunter.
And he was a serviceman in World War II.
Yeah, so he
kicked people's ass.
And he was writing these early stories for his kids.
Yeah.
Hence the error there. June, May. Oops.
Anyway, coming up on 43 minutes, this is the longest reading of Watership Down. And the next episode will be Eleanor and the King's Lettuce, which Nicholas is going to take up the
The mantle one.
mantle of that.